Ventilating an ICU patient without a ventilator. Hi, my name is Todd Seymour. I'm an MD anesthesiologist in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've done cardiac transplant, obstetrics, and general anesthesia in my career. I'm not an expert on lung disease or critical care, but I have been intubating and ventilating patients for the last 21 years. For the last 3 weeks, I've been very concerned about how many people might need ventilatory support during the pandemic. Let's use Salt Lake City as an example. We have 1.1 million people in this valley. It's predicted that 40 to 70% of us will be infected before a vaccine can be made available. This means that 600,000 could be infected this year. Based on data from China, we can expect that 55,000 to 110,000 will need ventilators for some period of time, probably more than a week each. In order to protect medical staff, we're being advised to intubate sooner and keep patients intubated longer. If we're very careful to not all be infected during the same week, it will take 2 to 6 times the number of ventilators we have available to keep everyone alive. If, like South Korea, we can flatten the curve, we might keep these numbers down until treatments improve, and we can keep the number of critical cases per week low enough to take care of everyone. In Salt Lake, we can probably care for about 600 per week. If, like Italy, Spain, and Iran, we miss our chance to slow the spread of the virus, we won't have a ventilator for everyone. We'll have to choose whether to deny care, share one ventilator for multiple patients, or hand ventilate. Most clinicians are familiar with the BVM or AMBU bag. We've all seen it, and many of us have heard it when patients are being transported from one department to another. In anesthesia, we prefer the Mapleson F or the Jackson-Reese circuit. The advantage is that the soft bag allows for either assisted, spontaneous, or controlled ventilation. The disadvantage is that carbon dioxide exits the system through the PEEP valve at the end of the bag, so high fresh gas flow is required to keep the system cleared of carbon dioxide. Patients need 3 things from a ventilator. First, a high enough percentage of oxygen to drive O2 into the circulation from the lungs. Second, enough air coming and going to ventilate or clear the carbon dioxide and maintain a normal pH. Third, the right combination of inspiratory and expiratory pressures, enough to keep the alveoli from collapsing between breaths, but not so much that you injure them and worsen the situation. With the addition of an antiviral filter, the Jackson-Reese can provide for all 3 of these needs, but it has limitations. Since it needs high flow of fresh gas, it can only deliver 100% FiO2 as you see it. If your patient needs ventilation or pressure support, someone needs to squeeze the bag. And as we know, when people squeeze the bag, they squeeze it too hard. And since we can't measure pressures, it's easy for clinicians to use too much pressure and injure the lungs. So like a BVM, hand ventilation requires more oxygen than is safe for the patient, and probably more pressure than is safe for the patient. So let's move on to a possible solution after this brief disclaimer. The following technique has not yet been evaluated on critically ill patients. Home CPAP machines are not designed to be ventilators, but may augment spontaneous ventilation. What follows are suggestions for how supplies can be used off-label to provide a viable short-term option for our current ventilator shortage. The intent of this video is to start a discussion and allow professionals in critical shortage areas to explore an option they might not have considered. This is not yet ready to be considered medical advice for patient care. I hope that critical care physicians and clinical engineers can help us refine this technique. I hope this will not be necessary for very long. So CPAP machines with bilevel capacity, which we call BiPAP, or expiratory pressure relief, which is a more common feature, can provide assisted ventilation to a patient who is making an effort to breathe but needs help. It can be set to provide inspiratory pressures as high as 20 to 25 centimeters of water with lower expiratory pressures. Since the machine takes in room air, we can vary the amount of oxygen we add to change the FiO2 from 30 to 85%, which is a very useful range. Warning, again, a CPAP cannot provide controlled ventilation to a patient who is not breathing. So, how do you put it together? Start with a Jackson-Reese circuit with a HEPA filter. Add a T-piece, preferably with a female-female connector like this blue extender. Third, I decided to add a second extender on the patient side of the T-piece to act as an oxygen reservoir and increase FiO2. Fourth, add a CPAP with bilevel pressure or expiratory pressure relief with a 22 millimeter connector hose. This is a standard CPAP hose. As you see, pressurized room air in yellow comes up through the gray hose on the inspiratory side of the T-piece. Carbon dioxide is exhaled through the blue side or expiratory side of the T-piece. It is being pushed that way by oxygen, which enters at the elbow as close to the patient as possible. The clear extender reservoir is a part of the circuit that has bidirectional gas flow depending on whether the patient is breathing in or breathing out. So how do you set up the CPAP machine? You enter the clinical reset mode of your machine with the ResMed machine, pressing the home and the dial button at the same time. It's different with different brands. If you have a bilevel machine, you can set the inspiratory and the expiratory pressure separately. If you have an auto-adjusting CPAP, first you will set the support pressure, then move to the next screen and set the EPR. The max EPR on the ResMed is only 3, which just decreases the pressure by 3 centimeters of water during exhalation, but it does make it easier to breathe out. How does gas flow during the respiratory cycle? Let's start with breathing out. When the patient begins to breathe out, of course, they fill the circuit with carbon dioxide. There's constant pressure from the CPAP side, adding room air to the circuit, and from the O2 line, adding oxygen to the circuit. This drives CO2 up and out of the patient's side and down the expiratory limb toward the bag. In the expiratory pause phase, where the patient is not moving air, of course, air is still flowing from the CPAP, driving the CO2 down toward the bag. Oxygen is still flowing in toward the patient and driving it up and out of the reservoir so that all the CO2 is down in the bag. When the patient is breathing in, of course, oxygen continues to fill the patient's side of the limb. Air is entering from the CPAP side, which leads to mixed gas flow depending on the amount of oxygen you've added to the circuit. Preliminary testing. The subject was a 52-year-old male in moderately good health who didn't have time to recruit anybody else last Friday or this Monday. 2 separate sessions were performed, approximately 40 minutes each. Airway was a 5-5 ET tube introduced orally. I did not intubate myself to simulate increased work of breathing. The outcomes measured were end-tidal carbon dioxide, FiO2 by gas sampling and IR analysis. I was not able to measure spirometry pressures or volumes. Preliminary results. At 4 liters per minute of oxygen, I was able to clear all carbon dioxide from the system, but the FiO2 was only 27%. I was very pleased to see that all the carbon dioxide was gone and I was inhaling none of it, telling me that the CPAP was adding plenty of air to the circuit, even though I wasn't adding very much oxygen. That initial FiO2 of 27% was improved once I added the patient side extension, showed by the yellow arrow. This created a greater reservoir for the oxygen, which increased the FiO2 to 37%. Even though there was greater volume in the circuit, we still cleared all of the CO2 with this low O2 flow. Next, I increased the regulator to 8 liters per minute of oxygen. This increased the FiO2 to 62%. The system, of course, cleared all CO2 between breaths. I should also add that at this point I was using the AirSense CPAP machine, not the bilevel CPAP machine, with the pressure support set to 9 centimeters of water. I found breathing to be very easy, even through the 5-5 endotracheal tube. This is less than half the maximum support that this machine could provide, so even if my lungs had a higher intrinsic resistance, I would probably still be able to move air. When I increased the regulator to 12 liters per minute of O2, the FiO2 increased to 86%. As an experiment, I took several vital capacity level breaths, and this seemed to entrain more air from the CPAP side of the T-piece circuit because my FiO2 decreased to 78%. However, I did not entrain any carbon dioxide. Inhaled carbon dioxide remained at 0. If the system is suddenly failing to oxygenate the patient sufficiently and the SATs are falling, I don't recommend squeezing the bag while the CPAP is attached. The sensors of the CPAP will respond with a pulsatile flow that does not add any air to the system or help the patient to breathe. Rather, take the circuit back down to a simple hand ventilation system where you can change the PEEP valve to vary the amount of pressure delivered and hand ventilate the patient until they can be returned to an ICU level ventilator. Tentative conclusions. Although a CPAP cannot provide controlled mandatory ventilation, many models can provide pressure assist with PEEP for spontaneously breathing patients. Critical care authorities are recommending COVID patients remain intubated longer, so many might benefit from pressure support, freeing up ventilators for more acute cases. Being able to set safe pressure levels that will assist breathing without causing injury seems like a significant advantage to hand ventilating or sharing a ventilator between multiple patients. With creative use of oxygen source and breathing circuits, the system can provide a wide range of FiO2, up to 85% in my tests. Although the lack of spirometry is frustrating, end-tidal CO2 monitoring is widely available, and it should help you determine if minute ventilation is sufficient. Remaining questions. Will this be useful for enough patients to help with the shortage? Can it be used as a step-down ventilator for those who still need high FiO2 and pressure assistance, yet no longer need paralysis and CMV? Is there a way to provide CMV with this approach? Is there a way to measure volumes and pressures? Is there a way to more tightly control inspiratory support pressure? I'm hoping for plenty of helpful comments and criticism. Finally, as of March 28th, Utah has only 602 confirmed COVID-19 cases out of 11,000 tested. Other cities will need to explore ICU ventilator options before we do. The intent of this presentation is to start a discussion that might result in creative solutions to help supply meet demand. Great work is being done already to increase the supply by inventing and building ventilators. We hope we can decrease the demand by decreased transmission rates and treatments to reduce severity of infection. In the meantime, we will look forward to everyone's input and ideas. Thank you, and good luck to all of us.